You see my patent? First patent application.
Where?
It's over there.
Oh.
Invention achievement for method for discerning investor users.
Internet users geographic
Region. Right. So everybody that knows where everybody comes from, I have to hold a patent on that.
So you have the localization, the IP,
Yep.
IP address, be able to tie that to a physical address.
Yep.
That's your IP. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Hey, you collected, royalties for that. Like,
No, I know I could. I didn't. I did it while I was a contractor with IBM.
Oh, okay,
So
the patent belongs to them? Or?
Yeah.
I see. But that was you.
Yeah, it was me. For determining geographic region.
That's used by every browser in the world.
I know.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I remember when I first discovered it. It was like, oh, this is pretty. It was pretty easy. It's when you think about it, how it's it's really strict, easy process.
You just need a cross-reference table,
right?
Right. You know, tie in specific IP addresses to
right.
the providers, and then the providers to the geographic location. Yeah. But somebody had to compile all that information.
It was available 20 years ago. I got that patent about 20 years ago.
Oh.
Yeah, 75. Let's see. Yeah, it was maybe 18 years ago.
Got it.
Whatever it was. It's on there.
Got it.
When was that? Oh, it was 2000, 18 years ago. Yeah, it was 18 years ago.
18 years ago?
Yep.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah,
All right, so let's come back. Let's come back to talking about. So we were talking about the 4 stages, and after that, or kind of started. We talked about managing up and managing down, so to speak, right? So managing your employees and managing your manager, and how you should ask your employees and tell your manager until the manager says, "I've made up my mind," and that's the special code.
Or it could be any. It could be any phrase. That's just the one I use.
Right. And then at that point you execute based on what the manager wants. So what if you disagreed with the manager? Like you just feel at the core like that's the wrong thing to do, but then the manager says, "I've made up my mind. Let's do this." What do you do?
Well, there's 2 different kinds of disagreements, at least. One kind is just a technical disagreement, and one's a moral disagreement. And if it's a technical disagreement, then you should do what your manager wants done. Now, if it's a moral disagreement and it's going to be a moral issue that's going to affect you dramatically, let's say you worked at Google and they wanted you to write an algorithm that would censor all of Hillary Clinton's speeches, you might feel that that's something that's morally repugnant to you, and you would not want to engage in that activity, and then you've got a decision to make. And that's a whole different discussion. But if it's strictly a technical situation, if you're in sales and they want you to spend money on this product instead of that product, or they want you to put resources in direction X instead of direction Y, and it's strictly a marketing decision, then you have to do what your boss says. Yeah, you have to do what your boss says. I mean, you have to, and do it well.
So coming back to family, so we've got 4 stages. What other frameworks or universal truths do you hold with regards to raising up a family?
There's, first off, and this is easier for guys than it is for girls, is that, for women rather, is that your spouse comes first, not the children. It's very difficult in the case of a woman to examine that. accept that because of the special bond that exists between a mother and a child. But even institutions that have been around for centuries will speak to the fact that the mother would take precedence over the child if you had to only save one of them. Because if you have a mother and you save the mother instead of the child, the mother can have more children. So the interesting fact is that I really believe that a husband and wife need to be united together in front of the children for sure. You know, whether or not they agree behind the scenes doesn't matter. The children have got to see a united front. And the children have to see the husband love the mother and the mother love the husband, the dad. So the husband and wife are the central core, and their relationship is central and most important to the family. And I've seen an awful lot of situations where the children become central. And not that together they aren't going to make together they are going to make the children the central theme. And I believe that that's right. But if you start looking at individual components, then it's the husband and wife have to come ahead of the children, their needs.
So the husband and wife comes together first. So it's more like take care of yourself first, and then
take care of them. Take care of your spouse first, then take care of the children.
naturally, if you take care of your spouse, then your spouse will, I guess, better take care of your children.
Yeah, exactly. So there's this hierarchy which I think really gets out of whack in some relationships.
So what are the warning signs when the spouse is taking care of the children more than the significant other?
Well, it's not when the husband feels threatened, because in the beginning of when the baby's first born, the husband gets a lot less attention, and that's just natural. So there is this period when husbands are getting a lot less attention than they're used to. I think that, like all things in marriage, there has to be a healthy discussion and a lot of discussion about what's the right amount of anything. What's the right amount of money? What's the right amount of time? What's the right amount of sex? What's the right amount of anything? You need to have a good, healthy discussion about that with your spouse, and not just make the assumption that I'm right or that I'm wrong. A lot of times I see spouses make the decision, well, they must be right and I must be wrong, and so I'm just going to go along with it, and resentment starts to build up. So you need to discuss it and say, look, are we spending the right amount of money on the kids' education? Are we spending the right amount of time with each other on dates? What is the right amount? And it's whatever you two agree to. It's different for everybody. Everybody's budget's different. Whether it's, some people spend money on cars, some people spend money on eating out. Whatever you feel is right for you guys is what you should do.
But coming back to your point, what you're saying is if you're spending so much time on your kids, energy and time on your kids and money on your kids, that you're starting to ignore your spouse's needs or spending quality time with your spouse, then there's an imbalance there, is what you're leading to.
Absolutely correct. What you said, though, imbalance, that's whose perspective is the imbalance from? Is it from the wife's perspective or the husband's perspective? Is the imbalance, as strange as it may seem, there are some spouses that don't think that the other spouse is spending enough time. The husband might not think the wife's spending enough time with the kids. They're out getting their nails done. Or the wife doesn't think the husband's spending enough time with the kids. He plays golf. So it's and as an outsider, I might think that it's all okay. It seems a reasonable balance, but it's not. It's not determined by any outside or any outsider's perspective. It's strictly what the couple feels is comfortable. And unfortunately, like everything else in life, and especially in marriage, you don't know what the right amount is until you talk about it. And there's a necessity that you really get involved in having the conversation that will determine the comfort level that you each have with the time constraints on the relationships. So don't don't assume just because some other couple does it X percent and Y percent that that's what you should do. It could be completely reversed because your relationship, what's important to you and your spouse is different than what's important to.
So finding the right balance is a matter of a discussion between husband and wife and
Yes.
agreeing on what the balance is, as opposed
Correct.
to someone arbitrarily, either
Right.
external or internal, saying that this is how.
Exactly. And when people always ask me all the time, well, how much should we be spent if I'm in a financial situation? How much should I be spending on X or Y? I can give you guidelines, but how much you spend is entirely up to you. How much time should we be spending with our kids, or again, that's completely up to you. There's no right or wrong answer on any of those issues. It's completely dependent on the comfort level that you have with each other, that you're spending the right amount of time. So, usually I find though that there's certain general characteristics that men don't ever think we spend enough time on sex, and women don't ever think we spend enough time on romance. There is some universal truths. So, and wives usually don't think husbands spend enough time with the kids, and husbands think the wife spend too much time with the kids. So there are some things that seem to pop up on a regular basis.
So from a guy's standpoint, how much sex is enough?
From a guy's standpoint, when how much sex is enough is when you wouldn't feel comfortable engaging in it. So when you're young, that's maybe only every couple hours. When you're older, it might be every couple of days or maybe even every couple of weeks. So women don't feel comfortable in engaging in it except on a periodic basis. It's longer than the periodic basis for a guy. And that period changes over time, changes with the seasons. So it's like you ask me a lot of questions like that, and I know that I always give you I always beg off the answer, because the only right answer is it depends.
It depends on you having a conversation with your wife and deciding what is enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds like it, yeah.
It really is. What is the right, what is the right amount?
And similarly, how much time should you spend with the kids is a conversation you should be having with your wife.
Exactly. How much money you should spend on jewelry? Some families it's zero. In some families it's 10%, 20, 30% of the budget. I have a client where it's literally 30% of their budget they spend on jewelry.
Wow. But if they both agree on it.
I don't know if they both agree on it, but
One party agrees on it more than the other.
Yeah, but they're both okay with it.
Right,
So,
right.
and I helped ease over that because I had, instead of classifying it as jewelry, I had them classified as an investment.
Makes sense, yeah.
So, if you think of it as an investment, then it's easier to stomach.
Right.
So it's just kind of a little restructuring of the
Right.
numbers.
Right.
Anyway,
So here's a different question. So what advice would you give to a couple, a newly wedded couple, like the top 3 things they should focus on to have a successful marriage?
intercourse, intercourse, intercourse.
Great. I'm sure they would like to hear that. So
But
what
the
do you think
intercourse,
about
the
that?
intercourse I'm talking about is verbal intercourse.
Okay, all right.
It's conversation, conversation, conversation. Because good verbal intercourse will lead to good sex. It really will. It's women love conversation, and if you're halfway care about your spouse and she halfway cares about you, the conversation is going to tend in that direction, and you're going to end up there. So, yeah, it's funny you should ask that. Sharon and I were mentoring a young man and woman. Neither one had dated very much. She was a little older than he was. Super nice people. I mean, really, both of them are really quality people. The young man I've known for 15 years, and his parents did a great job bringing him up. And he's very successful already at 26, I guess he is. He's already got a very successful business of his own. And they asked me basically that question. And when they came over to talk to Sharon and I a couple times before they were married and since they've been married, and she's done a wonderful job as a wife because he, just as a natural, well-balanced young man, was not that talkative, not that loquacious, not that verbose. But through his wife's drawing on him and through the conversations that we've had, he's become way more interactive, and their marriage is going very, very well.
So you mentioned verbal intercourse. Expand on that. What do you mean by verbal intercourse?
Well, there's different levels of sound transmission that two people can have. A lot of times, I see it all the time. It happens with me. I'll be talking and someone won't be listening to what I'm saying. They'll be thinking about what they want to say, what they want to interrupt, what their response is going to be. Hardest job I have teaching young people to be successful with clients is forget your agenda. Forget what you want to say. It doesn't matter what you want to say. It's what the other person wants. You've got to listen. It's a skill that seems to be very hard to teach, because these people are mature that I'm talking to, and they want to jump in with the solution that the client might not even want.
Right. But just so we understand, when you say verbal intercourse,
I'm getting to that.
you're not.
I'm getting to that.
Yeah.
It's intercourse. It starts down here with just sound waves. It's just talking.
Yeah.
That's not intercourse.
Okay.
Okay, and it's the analogy is, I'm not listening to what you're saying. I want to jump in with what I have to say.
Right.
So you've got this.
There's that listening.
Yeah, you've got this person that's trying to always transmit information. They're not. That's all they want to do. They're not taking anything in. And then there's information transmittal. The second level is like, I'll listen because you're going to tell me something I need to hear. And I'll tell you something you need to hear. It happens with engineers a lot. They just transmit data back and forth. And then the third level I'd say is conversation, where you're actually animated, interactive, and there's emotional context flowing as well as data. And then I think there's intercourse, where there's spiritual interaction on a verbal basis, as well as emotional interaction, as well as data interaction, as well as airwaves traveling back and forth. So there's like a much more intense kind of communication. It's where your spirit, soul, and body is all interacting with the other person on a verbal level, where you're actually your soulmates. You're having a conversation at a spiritual, emotional, data level all at the same time.
So it's communicating on a deeper level.
At a very deep level. Yeah, where it's, you really. Did you ever read a Heinlein book called Stranger in a Strange Land? It was a very famous book, and there was an expression that they used in the book called grog, G-R-O-G. It's about 40 years ago. Heinlein was a famous science fiction writer. Wrote a lot of very persuasive and off the beaten track stuff. Anyway, grogging was a term they used when you could really not just understand, but really deeply grasp internally what the other person was talking about. We don't have a word for that in our language, where you really, except intercourse, where you really are deep down grasping the emotional, spiritual context of what the person is trying to pass on to you.
It sounds like, given a specific context, when the spouse says certain words or a certain specific sentence, you're able to understand not just the words themselves, but on a deeper spiritual level, what it means and what it feels.
Wives expect you to do that as soon as you're married.
But men need to go through the 4 phases, right?
Yeah, men, right. Yeah, it takes us a long time to get to that level.
Finally able to share.
Right. So there's different levels of innate ability that we all start with. So.
Right. So there's verbal intercourse, there's intercourse, which I assume is the actual sexual intercourse.
Yeah, right.
And then what is the last intercourse? You say intercourse. What's the last intercourse?
Well, I guess that's a really good question. I hadn't really thought about that.
Or was it meant to be like an emphatic?
Yeah. So like
statement?
when you buy land, what's the 3 most important things? Location.
Okay, yeah.
And so.
All 3 about verbal
Yeah, but that's pretty. All 3 were actually. I was thinking about verbal intercourse, but now that you bring it up, there probably is. I'd have to think that through. There may be a third kind of intercourse that is really relative that I had never thought about before. So sometimes the questions like that are what cause me to actually have new insights. Yeah, have new insights. So maybe I'll get another insight now that I think, what's another kind of intercourse? It's I have to think that through. That's a very good question.
Perhaps share with Sharon.
Yeah, Sharon. Sharon. I'll share it with Sharon. Yes. There's probably at a level, probably a spiritual intercourse that takes place And I know that Sharon and I have been working towards that for a long time, but that hasn't consummated to the degree we'd really like it to. In any event, so I hope that answers your question, the most important things for a newlywed.